Well, the U.S. government naming Iran once again as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, blaming the regime in Tehran for the escalating conflict in neighboring countries and for attacks on U.S. forces in the region. President Trump is expected to hold an even harder line against the regime at the annual United Nations General Assembly session that starts here in New York next week. Reimposed sanctions against Tehran are currently in effect, with the second round set to go into effect in November. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo addressed the support of the current deal by the European countries.
Are the European countermeasures effective, though? Are they blunting U.S. policy?
If you just watch the traffic, it's one way. Folks are leaving Iran, including European businesses. And so I'm very confident that we will ultimately be effective at enforcing the sanctions that President Trump has asked us to reimpose.
Can those sanctions change Tehran? Joining us is California Congressman John Garamendi, a member of the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, always good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, Eric.
You know, the president last September, I don't know if you remember, how can we forget? He was outspoken on Kim Jong-un at the General Assembly, called him Little Rocket Man. What do you expect the president will say? What should he say about the theocratic, anti-American regime in Tehran?
Well, I wouldn't recommend the same language that he normally uses when he describes autocrats around the world. But he needs to be tough. He has been, and certainly should continue to be tough, and be very, very clear about what our policy is going forward. We should not have any lack of clarity about how we view this. Pulling out of the JCPOA, as America did, as Trump did, raised a lot of questions about not only our relationships with our allies, but also with the appropriateness or how these sanctions might work. Hopefully, Mr. Pompeo is correct that they are working. How we get back to dealing with the nuclear issue remains to be seen. Certainly, all of us were concerned about the other things that Iran does beyond the nuclear, and that certainly state-sponsored terrorism, as has been discussed in this section, a major problem. Also a major problem about what will be the role of Iran in Syria as that revolution or that uprising is stamped out by, among other things, Iran and the Assad regime. So we'll see. A lot of things are in play. I would hope the president is tough. I know, bombast is not, in my view, particularly useful, but we need to be tough. We need to be clear, and hopefully the president will be.
Well, the administration says that the sanctions are working, that, major European companies are pulling out of Iran because basically they're given a choice. Deal with Iran or you lose American business. So that is really hurting the Iranian economy. But do you think at the end of the day that will change Iranian behavior? Because, Congressman, we were told the Iranian nuclear deal would, but instead, $1.5 billion goes to Tehran, and they're shelling it out to Hezbollah and terrorist groups.
Well, the nuclear deal was about nuclear. It did not, and many people think this was one of the flaws, did not deal with all of the other things that Iran is up to. But it was being successful. It was successful, and probably still is at this moment, in deterring Iran from moving forward with its nuclear ambitions. Now, all of these other issues, which are important, certainly Syria, certainly the Hezbollah, certainly the way in Iran is dealing in Yemen, all of those are very, very important issues and need to be dealt with. To deal with those, the United States needs to be very tough, very clear, and to continue to work with our allies. And here again, our allies are certainly the Europeans. And I agree with you. All appearances are that the European countries and companies are pulling out of Iran, reluctantly, but nonetheless doing so. So I think we're on a path here. Needs to be very carefully managed. The shooting that took place in Iran, apparently yesterday, or maybe I guess it is yesterday now. That shooting is going to make things a little more complex. Not that they aren't already complex. The problem here is that Iran is very clearly blaming United States and its ally, others, including the United States. The result of that is that this thing could get amped up to be a very dangerous confrontation. And not good for all of us. Be tough. avoid a direct confrontation and continue to try to bring about change in Iran.
Yeah, well, a short time left. I just want to jump in on one thing. Iran has been accused of trying to launch a terrorist attack by spies against the National Council of Resistance of Iran. That's the group that former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani spoke in front of. Here is the mayor talking about that because there was a California man in your state arrested, accused of being an Iranian agent, spying on the group, planning potentially some type of surveillance, perhaps. Here's what the former mayor said.
In New York, we've had enough terrorism in New York for several lifetimes. We don't need some creepy Iranian agent hanging around New York trying to kill American citizens, two of whom are here with us today, who he was planning to murder along with another Iranian creep.
Pretty strong words. Your reaction to the fact that Tehran is accused of trying to murder American citizens here on our soil?
Well, I do meet regularly with members of that organization, and they express to me the concern that specifically you're discussing here. We have to prevent terrorism wherever it may occur, and specifically prevent terrorism of all kinds by anybody, homegrown, Iranian, Russian, or any other group here in the United States. Fortunately, our police organizations, FBI, and others were able to find out about this and prevent this one plot. But there'll be others. Iran is clearly a bad actor, as is Russia. So all of these things need to be very carefully monitored, and hopefully, and with appropriate support and interaction with our allies around the world, we'll be able to identify any terrorist organization or individual and put a stop to it before any nefarious thing can happen.
Yeah, it's shocking and brazen if that indeed is the case, that they're sending people here.
Indeed it is.
Congressman John Garamendi, I was out in California this afternoon. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Of course. Arthel?
Eric.